Hello and welcome to the Vintage Computing Christmas Challenge 2021. In short, VC3 2021, sometimes also referred to as Logitech's Christmas Tree Challenge. So first, how did I come up with this idea? It started with an educational example where students should implement a Christmas tree which looks exactly like the tree on the left side. The students should try to use the print statement, use some loops, loops in loops, and maybe even loops in loops in loops. And finally, they could optimize it and use their creativity. So, how they should go forward would be to paint a Christmas tree. They would count how many levels it has, how many stars are used, how many spaces are printed in front of the stars. So they could calculate everything, maybe using a formula, or some might have just stored the data and used the stored data to create the Christmas tree. Of course, I did my own implementation as reference at first. I will also put this in the releases, but out of compo, of course. So what I did was implementing it in Python. I used some for loops and the final print statement for the Christmas tree trunk. This I put together into one for loop, and later on I really used only one for loop which also included a trunk. Then I stored the data instead of using a formula within a string, and I converted the string to the numbers used to calculate the spaces and the stars. And then I used a format string which made the formatting easier because you could automatically center the string. And last but not least, I came up with my final version where I stored the data within a binary array and printed it just with a short format string, and this solution took me 53 bytes. I'll offer this implementation with all steps included as a reference out of compo, as said before. I also did a C64 implementation, but I didn't do it so far like with this one, so I will not release it because there were really many C64 entries. Well, I also did a little fun entry, which I want to show you now, but don't take it too seriously. Well, let's see what I did. It's a fantastic entry with only 12 bytes, yeah, and let's see how it works or what it prints out. Well, you see a Christmas tree, and let's look into the code. Just an echo of the Christmas tree in Unicode. That's it. So, you can see that the programs can be very different. So how do we compare the programs? Which one is the best program, someone might ask? Is it the fastest, the most readable, the best documented program? Is it the smallest? Is it the fastest to type in? And what is the smallest? Is the smallest source code? Is it with or without documentations? Do you count the new lines as 1 or as 2 bytes? Do you count spaces? How do you count tabs? And well, why not to compare the smallest executable? Well, executable with header, without header. Do you also count the name? Do you count the start address? How about the basic stuff? How about out start? And if you talk about assembler, does it mean machine code or really the assembler source code? Can we really compare this? We do have different languages with different capabilities, some with huge libraries, some with no libraries, some do have abbreviations, some do have tokens, some even have built-in compression. Hey, but this is a challenge. This is not a competition. You won't get any prizes. You compete with yourself. You try to get better and have fun. So before we start showing the entries, I want to tell you that I tried my best. Please forgive me my wrong pronunciation sometimes, typos might be there, etc. But all entries will be downloaded soon as I got them from the participants. The entries are in order approximately like I received them and entered them into the database. Finally, the entries will be sorted by size, but not ranked by size. The size was provided by the entrance, and there are different interpretations possible. So, if you want to look deeper into the entries, please download them, look into the code, and judge yourself. So, there were two variants of entries. The first variant was size optimized, where you try to do exactly the same tree like given. And the second variant was to create something creative, so it would look very nice, beautiful, dynamic, whatever. The shape of the tree need not to be exactly the same. Both variants will be presented together. I really recommend you to look into the size optimized examples, but also especially in the creative ones, as there are some beautiful artworks, especially by Pepe. So, let's start. The first entry by Anders Carlsen, written in BASIC for the Commodore 64. It consists of one single line. The data is saved in a string. The second entry is a special one because it contains 4 different versions how it is displayed. It's written by Jayan Kai in his scripting engine, which is available online, where you can quickly write code which is in a special form of BASIC, where you can have these different versions to display them. The third entry by Will, written in BASIC, a very short one, but it also shows an error at the end, which was allowed by the rules. An entry by Mike from Zero Team, written in BASIC for the ZX Spectrum, written in 3 lines. Now we have an entry from Will for the Commodore 128, written in BASIC. Another entry by Will. This one is special because the Commodore VIC-20 only has 22 characters in one line, but this tree has 23. A Commodore 64 version by Ronware, written in BASIC for the C64. Also a one-liner, and a very short one. This entry by Anders Carlsen is written for the Intellivision in compiled BASIC. As there is no stars that you could print, he used some kind of block graphic, pixels and so forth. Entry number 9 by Holy Moses from Roll for the Commodore, written in assembler. It's for all Commodore computers what he has been writing. Entry number 10 by Flaxman for the Commodore 128, written in BASIC, and he delivered us many versions also for dual screen and such. Flaxman also gave us this version for the PC, a batch, very straightforward. Entry number 12 by Coffee for the Atari in Turbo Basic, and it's a very nice one because this time we have blinking candles or lights on the tree. You can see the shortened version and the long one. Number 13, an entry by Will, this time in assembler, and it's very short. Number 14, also an assembler entry by Will for the Commodore VIC-20. Maurice Mackay delivered us the 15th entry, written in Python. This one is really short. The next entry, also by Maurice Mackay for the PC, written in Perl, a one-liner, which looks rather cryptic. Number 7, an entry for the Amstrad CPC, written in Z80 assembler by Arnold of Leosoft. Paul Dunn gave us this version for the PC, written in SpecParse, a special language. And number 90, an entry by Kaya Sturm for the Commodore C64 in assembler. This one is really tiny. Raymond Russell brought us the entry number 20, written in BASIC for the ZX Spectrum. Guti delivered this entry for Microsoft GW Basic. He used a lot of print statements, as you can see on the bottom. David Chalbert brought us this quick basic version, which also contains some red candles. Quill Blush made a short basic version, a one-liner, for the Commodore 64 in BASIC. Claire Wilson programmed in assembler and brought this Christmas tree to us. Quill from Blush also delivered a very short C64 assembler entry. It's very well documented, thank you. Divide from BS Labs programmed in Force for the Commodore 64. Looks very cryptic to me. Felix Nachdella made a basic entry for the Commodore 64 in 3 lines. Retro Programmers Insight made also a basic entry in 1 line. Now a special entry for the Lure from Pepe for the Pico 8 Virtual Console. It has very many colors. Pepe also did something for the Atari in BASIC. Also entry 31 is by Pepe for the Atari ST. And he also did an entry in JavaScript. JavaScript is embedded in HTML, and you can see the output here. This entry by Pepe is very special because there is a rotating tree, which we will look at later on. Another entry by Kaya Sturm for the Commodore Plus/4, written in assembler. The code fits on 1 page, even though it also includes documentation. Well made. Bernie brought us this assembler entry for the Commodore C64, and if you look at the position of the tree, it's really centered in the middle of the screen, and it's not like the others centered a little bit left or on the right. This makes this entry very special. He did the same also in BASIC. Entry number 36. Kaya Sturm with entry number 37, Commodore BASIC in 1 line. Bus 4000. Bus 4096 delivered this entry written in BASIC for the Archon BBC Micro Model B. Mick JSY delivered an Aquarius entry written in BASIC in 2 lines. Anders Carlsen delivered another entry for the TRS-80 in MicroBasic. Let's look what this is, because it's more than just a tree. Maybe it's a little bit hard to recognize, but the tree is rotating. Because the tree has not so many pixels, it's not so easy to see. But now you can see that it's the tree, which is lying. So let's move on to the next entry. This entry is by Dave from Bashi 555 for the VZ200, written in assembler. Entry number 42, also for the VZ200 by Dave, written in BASIC this time. Entry number 43 is a very special one, written for the Gamebuino in C++. The tree didn't fit totally on the screen, but it looks nice nevertheless. This entry by Pepe is very beautiful. It's in fact an intro which we are going to watch now, because I think it's a good time. Now an entry from O8MXL, a one-liner for BASIC from the Commodore 64. He also made a BASIC entry for the BBC Model B, entry number 46. LSL from Checkpoint delivered an Atari ST assembler entry. Gearstrom made another entry for the Dragon 32 in assembly, again well documented and fitting on one page only. Alana Kelly delivered this entry for the Commodore 64 written in assembler, and for her first entry ever, it's very nice. John Simpson made a BBC Micro assembler entry. Beepmaster with an BBC Micro BBC Basic entry in Basic and one line again. Serato from Finnish God came up with this fantastic entry. The code is very short and delivers what we all want to see, the Christmas tree. MMS made this basic entry for the Commodore Plus 4. Jonathan Hairston delivered this BDP11 entry written in BASIC. It's a one-liner. Neil made this entry for the Russian computer BK0010 in assembler. Very strong colors on this machine. Heidi Taylor brought us this Mattel Aquarius basic entry. There are a lot of books going on here, and the tree has the right colors. Doc K from Woods Plateau made this entry for the KC85/4 in assembler. A very rare machine. Patrice Carré created a basic entry for the Commodore C64 in 4 lines. George Kirkham with another basic entry for the Commodore C64, 1 long line. Jonathan Hairston with this BDP11 assembler entry, number 60. Number 61, Ash73 with this BBC Basic entry, 2 lines. George Kirkham with this Commodore 64 assembler entry. Steve 3000 with this BBC Basic entry. Then another Russian entry for the BK0010 in assembler by Manve from Sans. I like the keyboard of the computer. Frederik Ingvarsen delivered this entry for the PC Mathematica 10.3. So something useful you can do with Mathematica, can't you? Entry number 66 by Roland Lurs for the Acorn Atom in assembler. 4 lines of code. Gordon Henderson, with his own self-made Ruby 816, wrote this BCPL entry. Thanks a lot. Steve Harrison with another entry for the Acorn Archimedes, written in assembler. Looks like a fantastic machine. Guy Defender and Stuart Hurst came up with this basic entry for the Commodore 64 in 1 line. K.S. van Os has an Acorn Atom entry written in assembler, numbered 70. The next one by Michal Lokshar, a basic entry in 1 line, very short, for the Commodore C64. Another entry by Michal Lokshar in assembler for the Commodore 64. Pretty short. Old School Coder also with a short assembler entry for the Commodore 64 again, the most used machine within this challenge. Ash with a basic entry for the Model B from BBC. Norbert Landsteiner with a Commodore PET entry written in BASIC. MMS again within Commodore +4 entry written in BASIC, which is very colorful. Merry Christmas. Retroreferent with a 4th entry for the Commodore VIC-20. David Gibbelin using the 6502 simulator, writing an assembly entry. Bill G using a very old machine, the SWTBC 6800 flags, written in assembler. Nello Galliano made this entry with a very colorful Christmas tree. One pretty long line, isn't it? Entry number 81, Alex Shestipalov with an entry for the BK00 and a 0 in assembler. Also Helmut joined us, thanks for joining, in assembler with a short entry for DOS. OK Watts made something for the CRC65, which is a single board in the language called Figforth. Milex Mick came with an assembler entry for the Commodore 64, which also is very short. Number 85, Patrice Carré with an assembler entry, well documented, and I think this was her first entry for assembly language. KJ with a DOS entry, which is also very short. And KJ with an entry in BASIC for the ZX Spectrum in just one line. Helmut with another entry, and this one just uses 32 bytes. Great job, Helmut, and a beautiful Christmas tree. And here is the last run from Naufrager for the Commodore 64 in BASIC, another one-liner. So that's it. The compo is over. These were all entries. I will upload these entries to scene.org soon, and I also plan to present them on demostu.org. And maybe you just waited for it. So, just for fun, the sorting of the shortest entries in this challenge. The shortest program was the program by Helmut with 32 bytes. But he didn't follow the challenge exactly. He used some free interpretation, and therefore maybe Serater was the best one fulfilling the rules with his entry for the Commodore 64. Almost all entries here are for the Commodore C64, also the one from George Kirkham. Gaius Strom did an entry for the Commodore +4 and reached the 4th place. Krill with Commodore C64 assembly again. Dan and BBC Micro entry for BASIC by 08MXL. Then Commodore C64 again by Will, and another one by Michal Loksher. Then Helmut with his DOS entry. And finally Milex Mick with his Commodore C64 assembler entry. Maybe you ask, will there be another challenge again in future? Who knows? What you might need to know is I didn't plan this event to become that huge. In fact, I wanted to do something different, and then I thought, no, it's too big, and then this event should be something little as a trial, but it became much bigger than expected. So maybe watch out for next Christmas or even before, there might come something up. But until then, I would recommend you Love Bite 2022, where people really juggle with bytes and make great software. So, thank you for watching. I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Bye bye.